Welcome to today's lesson. We'll be dealing with properties. So the objective is to recognize and use the commutative, associative, and distributive properties to simplify expressions. So combine the numbers using the commutative and associative properties of numbers. Add the following numbers without using a calculator. Although the order of operation tells us we should add from left to right, think about an easier way to sum these numbers. So we have these numbers, and how would you add them? So again, just think about it. How would you add all of these numbers? How would you group them? And then find the result. So one example would be, you could take, when I rewrite the numbers, and then going to group them. Well, the way I would do it is I would group them and then from there I would add the groupings. So this would be 6, this would be 8, this would be 14, and then you continue. I would continue to group them. So I would take this and this. So this would give me 18, and then this would give me 22. And then I can add the two numbers, which would give me 40. So that would be one way to do it. I'm sure you would have another way of trying to add all these numbers to get to your answer. Right, so with addition and multiplication, we have two very important properties that have their technical names. You have the commutative property and you have the associative property. Commutative property is the order in which numbers are added or multiplied. It will not change the answer. So you have an example of a plus b equals b plus a. Or if it's with multiplying, it's a times b will also equals b times a. So if you had numbers, so it's 5 plus 3 will also equal 3 plus 5 because it gives you 8 for both of them. And then when you multiply, I don't know why my 8 is weird. So if you had 5 times 3, it will also equal 3 times 5. Okay, let me remove that. That's, oops. Try to fix that up. So you have 3 times 5, and that would give you 15. So commutative property, doesn't matter if you switch the order of the numbers, you get the same answer. Associative property is based on grouping. So it's how the numbers are grouped when you either add them or multiply them. And depending on how you group them, it will not change the answer. So if you had, let's say, 3 times 5 times 8, you could have this grouping together, and it would still equal if you group the 3 and the 5 together and had the 8 outside that grouping. You'd still end up with the same answer. Alright, so this is just fill in the blanks of examples with commutative property of addition and multiplication and associative property of addition and multiplication. So for this one, so it says 8 plus 4 gives the same sum as if you had it as 4 plus 8, and they both equal 12. The commutative property of multiplication, so 6 times 3 is the same if you did 3 times 6, and it both gives you 18. Under the associative property of addition, if you have 3 plus 5 grouped together and add the 9, it will be the same if you had 3 plus and then in the group 5 plus 9. And when if you were to add up either this group or that group, you would get 17. Okay, next one is associative property of multiplication. The product of 2 times 5 in a group times 7 will be the same if you did 2 and it's outside, and the 5 and the 7 are grouped together. So when you multiply those two, either one of the two groups, you would get 70. All right. So it says these properties gives us permission to rewrite addition and multiplication in different order than what are normally given. Something to think about. What about subtraction and division? Do those properties work if you switched it? So just think about it and wonder, give two numbers, whether you divide in or subtract in, and see what happens. Right, so for me, I'm just going to give an example for subtraction. So if I did 5 minus 3, let me undo that. I don't know why the pen is weird. 5 minus 3, it would give me 2. But if I did 3 minus 5, that would give me negative 2. Not the same. And the same thing, if I did, say, 14 divided by 2, that would give me 7. But if I did 2, I switched the order, I did 2 divided by 14, that would give me 1 over 7. So notice that they're not equal. So with subtraction and division, you cannot switch the order. But with multiplication and addition, you can. And you can try this with any number and see if you can end up with a number that's the same based on switching the order for subtraction or division. Now the distributive property is used a lot in algebra to simplify terms. So with the distributive property, for any numbers a, b, and c, if you had a times b plus c in the group, it will equal ab plus ac. The same thing with subtraction. You would have a times b minus c, it would be ab minus ac. So basically, you're distributing each term inside the parentheses with the factor outside the parentheses. And most common mistakes that happen is that the first number gets distributed, but the second usually gets ignored. So be careful, whatever's in the parentheses, it has to be distributed with the factor outside the parentheses. So the question is, how many operations are used? Okay, let's see. The first thing you did was distribute. And then you either going to add whatever you have or subtract. So I'm just going to put add and or subtract. So that means there's 2 when you're dealing with that. Either you distribute and then you add, or you distribute and you subtract. Okay, so we're going to have an example. It says rewrite the following expressions using the distributive property. So we see there's an 8 there. We're going to distribute the 8 to each term inside the parentheses, so that would be 80. And then that would be 32. And then your answer would be 112. Same thing with this. Even if the number is behind the parentheses, you're still going to distribute. And remember, whatever sign is in front of that number, it belongs to that number. It has to be part of the operation. So 6 times 12, 72. And then this will be negative 18. So when you subtract those two, you'll have 54. All right, so now this one is a little different. from what we did with the two examples, but we can still use the distributive property to find each product. So we got 16 times 102. You could use the calculator, but let's say you didn't have a calculator. What can you do? You can break the number that's inside into two numbers that will give you 102. So you would have 16. All right, let me change this because it's being wonky. All right, so we have 16, and then we can break it to 100 plus 2. That will give you 102. Now you can distribute and make it a little easier. Okay, I'm trying to make sure this doesn't look weird. Do it from the bottom here. So then you'll have 1600, and then this will give you 32. And then you can add it. Put that over here, 1632. Rather than doing doing the multiplication or doing it in the calculator, you could just break the number inside. Even with mixed numbers, you break this down. So it would be 3 plus, oops, not 3 plus, it's 3 multiplied, because you're multiplying that, so 3 and 1 over 17, and the 17 is outside, and then you can distribute. This one, 17 times 3 should give you, make sure, 51, and then the 1 times 1 over 17 times 17, it will just give you 1, because it's 1 times 17 divided by 17, it's just 1, and your number will be 51. So again, that's a way to, if you don't have a calculator, break the numbers apart, then you can distribute and then find your result. All right, so this we're going to just pass through, go to the next one. So terms, you need to know what a term is. A number, it could be either a number, a variable, or a product of, or quotient of numbers and variables. Like terms, like means same. Terms that contains the same variables with corresponding variables having the same power. So for example, we have 3 terms. What makes a term a term? They're separated by either a plus, a minus, any operation. So we got 2x squared, that's one term, that's 6x, that's the second, and 5 is the third. Yes, it's a number, it's a term still. So we've got 3 terms here. And then for this one, we have 3 terms because they're separated by pluses. There's 2 pluses in between each. But notice that the 3a squared is like term to 5a squared because they have this in common. But the 2a does not have anyone in common. So it's an unlike term compared to 3a squared or 5a squared. So that's what like terms and unlike terms are. Coefficient is the number, the factor, in front of a term. So with the coefficient, so I'm going to put this in red. So this is the coefficient. It's the number in front of the term. So this is also a coefficient. This is a coefficient. This is a coefficient. And this is a coefficient. All right, so we're going to do an example. Again, this is all dealing with distribution and also grouping like terms if there's any. So for this one, we're going to have 5g minus 45. You can't combine these because it's not like terms, so you leave it as is. For this one, my pen is not doing what it's supposed to do. Let me turn this off first. So turn it back on again, and let's see if this works. Alright. Alright, so this one will be 6x squared, and then you have that plus. So this would be 12x, and then 3 times -1 gives you -3. You can't combine, so you leave it as is. Alright, so we're going to simplify, and if there's any chance of us to combine like terms, you do it. These have the same like terms, so then that will be, oh, my 3 looks weird. Having technical difficulties with this pen, so 33x. Let's look for like terms. This and this are like terms, so we can combine. That will give us 12n squared. And then the 10n we can put there. And I'm just going to remove this one because it's not looking right. Alright, again, you can't combine them because they're not like terms. Okay, more of this, but now we have other stuff where you're going to have to distribute and combine like terms and all that stuff. So for this one, we just bring this down. We're going to combine, just do the distribution first. So this would be plus 14r plus 10, because 2 times 5 is 10. Now we're going to combine in like terms, so -6 plus 10, that's 4, and then plus 14r. There's our answer. Let's do this, same thing. We're going to distribute first. Anytime you see parentheses, we're going to distribute first. So the very first thing. This will give us 12. Bring down the plus 7. Combine these two because they are the same. Right. Pen is lagging. So 4x plus 19. Okay, so it says when you distribute a negative, remember the rules for multiplication by a negative. So remember, a negative times a negative gives you a positive, and a negative times a positive gives you a negative. So whatever sign is in front of the number belongs to that number. It's stuck together. So we're taking this whole thing and we're going to multiply to each term. Again, my curves look weird, so I'm going to have to do that again. So notice that negative in front of that 5, that's going to belong to that 5. So we're going to have negative 24x, and this will be positive, because negative times negative gives you positive, and then that's our answer. Now, sometimes you're not going to have a number behind the negative. That means we have an invisible 1. And I'm going to put that in blue. Almost if we can fit that here. So that's our invisible 1. So that way, you know that you're multiplying that 1 with whatever inside the parentheses. So I'll use that color. So we have double distribution to do. So we're going to do 28x, and then 7 times -5 gives you -35. Bring down the plus 6. Remember, you're not going to use that 6 to distribute the numbers in the parentheses. It's whatever's in front of the parentheses, right in front of it. So we have the -1 times -2x gives us positive 2x. -1 plus 9, -1 times positive 9 gives you -9. Now we're going to combine any like terms. We got the 28x and 2x gives us 30x. Okay, and then anything else that is, no, so then we're left with numbers. So we have negative 35, and then we have 6, and then we have negative 9. So then that means we're going to add the 35 and the 9. So that'd be negative 44. And then bring down the 6, and then continue to combine. So negative 44 and positive 6 gives us negative 38. Can't combine these two, so we're down to our answer. 30x minus 38. And there you go. Let's see if I got to the end. Yep. All right. So basically what we learned today was about properties. So I'm just working my way back to the front. Okay, so we learned about the commutative property and associative property. So commutative property, you can switch the order of the numbers and still get the same result. Same thing when you're multiplying, addition and multiplication. Associative property is all about grouping. So you may have 3 numbers that you are multiplying or 3 numbers that you're adding. If you group the first 2 and add the third, it will be the same as if you just group the last 2 and add the first. Same thing with multiplication. We also learned that subtraction and division, the commutative property and associative property will not work. It will give you a total different answer. So only multiplication and addition can work under those 2 properties. And the distributive property is all about whatever is inside the parentheses, you're going to simplify by distributing. So the factor outside needs to be multiplied to the terms inside the parentheses. And then you do whatever operation you have to do. And you can also do the distributive property with numbers. So like I said, if you don't have a calculator, take whatever is inside the parentheses and break it into 2 numbers that you can add so that way you can distribute. Always look for easy numbers, especially if you have zeros at like your 10s, 20s, 30s, anything like 5, 10, 15, 20, stuff like that. Break it into those 2 numbers, so that way whatever number you distribute outside you're using to distribute, you can get to your answer. And it also works with mixed numbers. And we also learned about terms. Trying to wait for this to go. Terms basically it could be a number, a variable, or a combination of a number and variable. And terms are separated by pluses, minus, division, multiplication, whatever sign. It's separated by that. And like terms, make sure that they have the same corresponding variables in order to combine them. And if they're not the same, then they're unlike terms. And we learned that coefficient is the number in front of the term, and usually it's in front of the variable. All right, so, and the one last thing, a negative, pay attention to negatives when especially multiplying, or if it's in front of a number or in front of a parentheses when you have to distribute. Don't forget about the negative. All right, this concludes our lesson. Have a good day.